You may be seated. Good morning. I'm Susan Yaki, the director of the La Follette School of Public Affairs at UW-Madison. It's my pleasure today to welcome you, graduates, families and friends of graduates, Lieutenant Governor Barnes, faculty, staff, special guests, to the 2022 Robert M. La Follette School of Public Affairs graduation ceremony. This day is the culmination of many years of effort. Indeed, today is a celebration of these efforts and of your dedication to public service, as well as an acknowledgement of the people who helped to get you there. Most importantly, your family and friends. Welcome. Before we begin this celebration, I'd like to take a moment to recognize how the pandemic has impacted this class. Indeed, some in this class have lost loved ones, and some have been sickened themselves. All of them have been impacted in their studies and in their lives. As we come together to reflect on their many accomplishments, let us be thankful that we are here together to celebrate. And let us remember the many people who could not be with us today. They are not forgotten. I now have the honor of introducing Cartesia J Lawrence, who was voted by the graduating class to speak today. Cartesia is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and in 2015 she graduated from UW-Madison, where she double majored in legal studies and Afro-American studies. Cartesia is fiercely passionate about creating and executing equitable policy that positively influences vulnerable families. She's proud to have held positions as an Aspire intern in the city of Milwaukee's Department of Civil Rights, as an educator through AmeriCorps' Teach for America, and as a policy fellow with the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus Foundation. Cartesia is driven by her experiences growing up in Milwaukee's 53206 zip code. She's a first-generation, as well as driven by her first-generation Jamaican grandfather and her wonderful family. Cartesia served as a project assistant to Associate Director Steve Kulig while at the La Follette School, and Kulig characterizes Cartesia as an extraordinarily talented student. And he specifically called out her role as a skillful moderator of the La Follette School's Elevating Equity and Policymaking series. Cartesia, the floor is yours.
Y'all are gonna have to bear with me today. I got engaged to the love of my life yesterday. So it's just been an amazing weekend. I'm gonna try not to cry because that's gonna ruin my makeup and the whole thing today. But I am just so honored to be here before you all today. And I really just want to take this all in because, wow, what a journey it's been. Especially as someone coming back to UW-Madison, having graduated from here in 2015, to be a part of the La Follette School of Public Affairs has been a dream come true. I know that my late grandfather, Stedman William Plummer, an immigrant from Kingston, Jamaica, is looking down on me. He was a champion of class and a huge supporter of education. I remember one summer, I was in between jobs, I was interviewing for jobs, and I was asleep on the couch in the middle of the day. I had just finished a workout, I was really active at the time. And he came rolling through in his wheelchair, and he said, "Get up and read a book." Like, what are you doing? It's the middle of the day, get up and read a book. And I got up immediately, and I realized in that moment that he was helping me to understand that there was no opportunity I couldn't access if I stayed focused. He passed the summer before I started my program, but he was aware that I had gotten admitted, so I'm so happy and proud of that. But I really feel his energy here today, and I'm excited to honor him as I speak. So to the Follette School staff, faculty, our Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes, family, friends, and alumni here with us physically and virtually, I'm delighted and humbled to stand before you today, voted by my peers as the student speaker. So I'll invite you to celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me, but has failed. Now for a few weeks, the thing that tried to kill me was taking stats and microecon at the same time. And I guess it didn't help that I had my first child during midterms. I think it was William who said she had her baby and like never even missed a class. And I was like, I didn't miss any econ classes. I was in the hospital on my computer. The doctors are coming in like, what are you doing? You just had a C-section, what are you doing? So I spent the first year juggling class, Zoom calls, spit up, a PA-ship with Steve, an LTE position at DHS, and what felt like a million diapers, but we made it. And I can also say proudly that the Follette School supports mothers, and that's huge, especially in a time like this. So I borrowed those words earlier from a Black feminist scholar, Lucille Clifton, and they ring so true, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. I, like many of you, I assume, applied to the Follette School, excited to come to Madison and explore this, beautiful place, this city on a lake, to meet colleagues also interested in the policy area I was, to connect with and learn from renowned faculty, and to attend UW's amazing events. But sadly, our first year, we didn't really get that. We were relegated to Zoom school. And for those of us who are extroverts, and I'm sure for those who are introverts, I know that that was hard. But as I sat and thought about all of the things that we faced alongside each other these past 2 years, many of the memories that I had were positive and life-giving, like my study groups. A group of powerful and kind and brilliant women who held me my first year. I really could not have done this program without you. So thank you so much to my study group. I'd like to spend a few moments with you all talking about some of the life-giving lessons that I learned during my second lap at UW. If it's okay with you all, I'll also leave you all with a few charges. So the first is gratitude. Gratitude is so much more than a warm thank you after a professor extends you an extension, and I'm so thankful for the professors who extended the extensions because I needed them. But gratitude is a heart posture. It's a verb. It's the act of knowing deep down that people could really be doing other things, but they're helping you, they're loving on you, they're supporting you, and it's important to remain honored that people extend themselves in service of you. Show gratitude, y'all. When I first began my career at the Illinois Department of Human Services, my mom taught me that the two most important people in that cold Chicago building were the secretaries and the custodians, and that I should make it a point to be nice to and grateful for them. And she was right. Gratitude, for many who feel their contributions are not valued, can be life-altering. A small, thoughtful token of appreciation, a shout out to a team member in a meeting publicly, or even a short email is a great first step. I challenge you as you go out into the world as budget and policy analysts, assistant directors, even directors, to carry a gratitude heart posture. Truly thankful for those who keep your ship moving forward, though no one can do this alone. And that's my son up there making noise, of course. I'll lead with example and say thank you to my village, especially those in my weekly schedule who make it possible for me to live in 2 cities, some days commuting over 3 hours while listening to a seminar series in the car, and for helping me with my amazing little man up there, Kareem. To my best friends, India and Amani, thank you for holding me close and constantly checking in on me. To my brothers and sister, thank you for teaching me to be resilient. To my fiance, for holding me accountable and loving me through my moments, because I have some moments, y'all. To my entire family, I stand before you today, not self-made. This is for 5 through 206. And specifically, this is for you, Mom. For all the sacrifices you made for us, for all of the love you've shown us, and all of the time you spent nurturing us. It's your time now. Now second, so I can stop crying. All right. The La Follette School Board of Regents member, Theo La Carta, who was the first speaker in the Elevating Equity and Policymaking series, the first student-moderated speaker series, which I'm super proud about. Let's give a round of applause for that. Theo spoke at length about the intent she uses when hiring her team. She talked about giving people opportunities. People who she had seen shine in other areas, people who didn't think or look like her. She makes sure her teams are truly diverse in experiences and skill set, and she recognizes the power of having people on her team who understand the implications of policies, recognizing that policies affect real people. Equally as important, she makes sure that there are voices at the table who have been personally impacted by the programs she implements. The vulnerable children and families who are impacted by benefits cliffs and eligibility determinations. I'll take Theola's comments even further and say that who you have in the room is your politics. There should be no doubt that people's experiences shape who they are. So I'll charge you in your personal and your professional lives to keep people around you who have different perspectives than you. After reading Governor Evers' budget and noticing his strong stances on funding mental health services for students, expanding Medicare coverage for vulnerable citizens, establishing community health grants, and even creating the Governor's Health Equity Council, I can't help but to think that he isn't doing this alone. Under his administration, we elected the first African-American lieutenant governor of Wisconsin and the second African-American to hold statewide office ever. We actually grew up right around the corner from each other in the 53206 zip code, which has the worst health outcomes for its residents, an area riddled with boarded up houses and astronomically high incarceration rates. And it's my bet that Governor Evers' priorities are a reflection of not only him and his experiences, but absolutely with the people who he has surrounded himself with, who support him. They are a reflection of the lives that they've lived and the lessons that they have learned throughout. And on that note, I'm so grateful for Anna and Genevieve and Indu and Amber and Muhammad and Kelsey and Dylan and Molly and Jack and Ian and Liz and everybody, and I could keep going. I could literally name all of you, but I'm so grateful to have been in community with you. I was so nervous coming into this program because I didn't want to feel excluded in a field that is so white male dominated, and I didn't feel any of that. Though many of us are so different, we're all passionate about making this world a more thoughtful, equitable place, and that's what makes us special. Lastly, I'll leave you all with this. Proverbs 18:21 says that there's life and death in the power of the tongue. So what will you say? I ask you, will you stay silent when you notice that the data doesn't really tell the entire story? Will you point out when the experiences of program participants are not included in the important decision-making process. What will you say when you see a colleague being railroaded by the director every time she talks? Will you be a reductionist on the team who never fully buys into the vision? Or will you be a champion? Will you add to the vision? It's my hope that you'll use the positions that you have in city and state government, in think tanks and nonprofits, and even in your homes as parents and partners to speak life and abundance. Why? Because we need it. There are enough naysayers in the world. We don't need to be them. It's a privilege to have learned all of the things that the La Follette faculty and the experience here have taught us. I truly believe that there is no group in the world better equipped to make the impact that we're capable of. La Follette School of Public Affairs, class of 2022, I invite you to join me on a journey to make positive, transformative impacts in every organization, city, state, county, and the world that you go out and encounter. Join me in making the changes that you want to see. Thank you.
We are very proud of her. It is now my pleasure to introduce La Follette School Professor Greg Nemet.
I thought he said myself.
It's still my pleasure to introduce La Follette School Professor Greg Nemet. Nemet received his doctorate in energy and resources from the University of California at Berkeley. His research focuses on understanding the process of technological change and the ways in which public policy can affect it. He teaches courses in energy systems analysis, policy analysis, and international environmental policy. Nemet's book, How Solar Became Cheap, a model for low-carbon innovation, was published in June 2019. In it, he makes the case that by understanding the drivers behind solar energy's success, other low-carbon technologies with similar properties can benefit. He's currently a lead author for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 6th assessment report, which has received major international press coverage. During this academic year, Nemet received the university's Vilas Mid-Career Award and the university's Kellett Mid-Career Award. Both are extraordinarily competitive university-wide scholarly recognitions. Greg, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Susan, for that kind introduction. And thank you, Cartesia, for that inspiring set of remarks. Wow, like what a tough act to follow. It's an honor to share the stage with you and with Lieutenant Governor Barnes. And as Cartesia said, what a journey since spring 2020, when you received your acceptances to the La Follette School from Mo. I'm proud of each of you for sticking with it and making it through to the end of your master's degrees, and what a perfect setting here to celebrate that. So my name is Greg Nemet. I teach courses at La Follette in policy analysis, environmental governance, energy analysis, and I advise the final capstone projects. And throughout the courses that you've taken over the past couple of years, there's always an emphasis on analysis. That involves scoping out the background of a policy problem, its history, its market failures, its government failures, the current status of policy. And policy analysis typically involves understanding the systems themselves. And so that's where quantitative tools provide valuable insight. multivariate regression, benefit cost analysis, program evaluation, and even learning how to use style sheets and reference managers and graphics in Word. They all bolster your ability to do and communicate policy analysis that can inform policy design and implementation. And over the past 2 years, you've done the work, you've learned the techniques and how to do it. You now go forth into the real world as trained analysts. You have the tools, you will get the data you need, you will play important roles as trusted, reliable, honest brokers of policy advice. But you must sometimes ask yourself the questions, does good policy analysis really matter? Does it make a difference? I see you asking, either explicitly in class or by the expressions on your faces in class. And so I've started talking about it more in the courses I teach. Policy analysis matters because policy decisions are important. It matters if we get them right. Your clients depend on you for good information. If you do it well, your analysis stands out. If it's viewed as nonpartisan, your analysis will be credible. But sometimes even these reasons aren't enough, and I can tell on your faces, even with masks on. And I ask myself that question too. Does policy analysis really matter? When on the other side, there are political action committees, Citizens United, well-funded and sophisticated lobbyists, politicians who lie, scientists who are enlisted as merchants of doubt, social media bots that polarize our discourse, the January 6th insurrectionists who threaten the rule of law. In my policy area, climate change, there were decades of analysis that supported the design and implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change in 2015. One negotiator told me after that it was a miracle for 195 countries to have reached a consensus. And yet, with the stroke of a pen and apparently no analysis, the US withdrew from the Paris Agreement in June 2017. It was in a Rose Garden speech that I streamed live in my office, and it left me in tears sitting there. And despite all of this, the faculty, the staff, our alums, our friends, the public officials who serve here, we do this because it matters. We teach because it matters, we research because it matters, and we do outreach because policy analysis matters. Let me give you a brief, recent personal example with an international perspective. So as Susan mentioned, for the past 3 years, I've been working as a lead author for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that's the UN body that provides objective analysis for the UN climate negotiations with a major report every 7 years. So we wrote hundreds of pages, we cited 20,000 references, we responded individually to 60,000 comments from experts and government officials who had reviewed the report. Lots of analysis, so good job. And last year, I was asked to be on the core writing team to draft the 20-page summary for policymakers. So unlike the full report, that summary has to get approved line by line by all 193 UN member governments. So that's what I did for my spring break and into early April. I did Model UN in high school, so I thought, this is going to be great. This is like Model UN for grown-ups. So we knew from past reports that approval proceeds at 150 words per hour. So I'm probably speaking at 150 words per minute. So this is glacial. And so it's a 99,000 word summary, so that takes a while. So normally the UN dedicates 1 week for approval, but because it was online due to COVID, we allocated 2 weeks. But by the last day, the Friday night at the end of 2 weeks, only 1/3 of the summary had been approved, and the remaining 2/3 included all the contentious issues, and progress was stalled. So that began a dark weekend when the summary should already have been formally approved. We canceled our planned celebration events and went into the weekend unsure what to expect. The authors of the summary took turns on the podium explaining and defending the analysis. So I was on the podium starting at 7 a.m. on that Saturday morning, and then occasionally throughout the day, and I didn't finish my sections until 5 a.m. the following Sunday morning. And that involved explaining the text, defending it, and responding to government's comments. I soon learned that even half a second of hesitation in a response would elicit many raised hands by countries, and each of which consumed valuable time for deliberation, and all of it lowered the probability of approval. It was an intense experience being on the podium, responding to dozens of questions by country delegates, coming up with a response to groups of 5 to 10 comments at a time, and meanwhile, having a second screen with Slack with my team, scrolling messages saying things like, here's how to handle this, cite this statistic. And sometimes in the messages on Slack were things like, nice job, Greg, or wow, they approved that sentence, or alternatively, they smell blood, we need to ask for a break. I wrote that one when I was on the podium. So it was exciting, but it was also uncomfortable. The countries held all the cards. Every country had a veto on the text, and on paper, could simply object to everything we said until we modified it to their liking. In some cases, we were able to find compromise language, but in many cases, we could not. Often we had to stand firm and say, this is what the science says. I produced one of the 8 graphics in the summary, and you all know from Capstone that graphics matter a lot. And so my explanation of what was in the figure had to be ironclad. I had to be able to justify and explain every one of the 300 or so data points in the graphic. I knew that some of the country delegations had really delved into that to look at where everything had come from. The figure could easily be rejected and dropped from the report, even if just a few countries were unconvinced by it. I thought that figure about cost reductions in clean energy made a distinct, important, and hopeful message, and I was determined to keep it in the report. So I spent hours on the podium explaining it and eventually getting it approved, and that has been the coolest thing I've done in my career. But it was only part of the report, and there was much more to get approved. And for a petrostate that wanted to preserve fossil fuel use indefinitely, it felt like they had complete control over the report, and all we had as authors had was to say, this is what our analysis says. I remember the moderator who's from South America, Thelma. She was super experienced diplomat. She used humor and an ebullient, playful tone to diffuse the tension of the negotiations. She made me smile. One time when I arrived on the podium and I was smiling loose from some funny thing she had just said, and she saw me doing that and she expressed joy saying, this is how I'd like to run my sessions. And she'd kept up this upbeat tone for 2 weeks. But I knew things were grim later on when we had spent multiple hours in a session with no new text approved. Even Thelma felt it. She was clearly subdued by the lack of progress. She begged one of the petrostate delegates to please reconsider, reflect on these arguments, and find some way to be flexible given all the hours of effort being made by hundreds of people in this session. But that delegation provided the same response they had for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, despite our tremendous efforts to be flexible, we cannot accept this language. This sent Thelma into tears, and seeing the delegates' recalcitrance crush Thelma's ebullience was extremely discouraging. I heard from others that an approval process had never been this difficult or gone this far past the deadline. I and others had serious reports that this report would even see the light of day, and indeed the Secretariat had started making contingency plans in case we were not able to release a summary for policymakers at all. But late in the approval process, in the early morning hours on Sunday, the tide started turning. Supportive countries started actively restating our explanations. We spent from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. approving one sentence that said the world needs to substantially reduce fossil fuel use to stabilize the climate. But we got it approved. We spent hours rephrasing paragraphs to address delegates' concerns, and we got those approved. We provided strong explanations, detailed pointers to sources, and data to support our claims. And those arguments eventually won out. And by late Sunday night on April 3rd, the entire summary for policymakers was approved after 16 days, 2 days past the deadline, and after a final 40 hours of continuous negotiation. The messages that came out of the summary were clear, and I've been proud to talk about them. As a result, we now have text that staff can take to their environmental ministries and say, look, this is what the science says. And even more, here's what 195 governments agreed to. It was a long and messy process, but I've never experienced speaking truth to power as directly as that. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but it can, and that's my last point. Policy analysis is worth doing because it might matter, and the chance that it does matter is enough to make policy analysis worth doing. Doing policy analysis requires optimism. It requires seeing the favorable possible outcomes and working towards them, enabling those outcomes, doing the work so that when a policy window emerges or a policy advice window emerges, you are ready. In my work on climate change, people often ask me how I can be optimistic given that the opposing political forces, other than analysis, are highly mobilized, well-funded, sophisticated, apparently ruthless. Discourses of delay can seem to prevail. Over the years, I've developed a 10-point list of reasons to be optimistic on climate change, and that list helps. But I now have a much simpler view of why we should be optimistic, and that is, we have a moral responsibility to be optimistic. Of course, there's a lot of bad news out there, and personally, I often find it overwhelming and hard to cope. But being pessimistic is not the answer. Pessimism about societal and policy problems is easy. It's lazy. It's super safe. It requires zero risk. It might actually make you appear serious and even wise, but don't fall for it. Pessimism is pernicious because it moves us closer to a cynical world in which societal problems fester and grow. The Austrian philosopher Karl Popper said, "Optimism is a duty. The future is open. It is not predetermined. No one can predict it except by chance. We all contribute to determining it by what we do. We are all equally responsible for its success." So doing good policy analysis is rare and it's valued, even if the results will never be loved by all. You all have a real opportunity to contribute. Go be fighting Bobs, and congratulations, graduates.
Thank you, Greg. What an inspiration. Mandela Barnes serves as Wisconsin's 45th Lieutenant Governor. He was elected on November 8th, 2018. He's the first African American to serve as Lieutenant Governor in Wisconsin and the second African American ever to hold statewide office. In 2012, at the age of 25, Lieutenant Governor Barnes was elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly, where he served 2 terms. His time in the State Assembly included serving as chair of the legislature's Black and Latino caucus and becoming a recognized leader on progressive economic policies and gun violence prevention legislation. The Lieutenant Governor uses a platform of sustainability and equity to fight for solutions that invest in opportunities and fairness for every child, person, and family in Wisconsin. Our class nominated and asked the Lieutenant Governor to be with us today, and we are so thankful that he did. The floor is yours.
Well, I want to thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. It certainly brings back a lot of memories being in this specific room. Some people will say good memories, I just say memories. Really want to thank you, Director Yaki, for the introduction, everything that you do for the La Follette School of Public Affairs. And I just want to say thank you all for attending to witness this great moment for so many amazing, wonderful students who will certainly go out into the world and change things for the better. Hopefully that change happens right here in Wisconsin. It's not too late to bring you back, Cartesia. And just want to thank you, Professor Nemet, because I know what it's like. I was at COP25 in Madrid, and it was a time where people were stuck trying to figure out what they were going to do globally, because the United States of America had abdicated our responsibility to reduce carbon emissions, and people were looking to us for leadership. And we talked about the things we were doing at the state level with the U.S. Climate Alliance, which was a bipartisan coalition of states that vowed to uphold the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, regardless of the fact that we had been formally withdrawn. And I'll just say, COP25 was a disappointment. COP26 in Glasgow, still a disappointment. There's still so much more work that we need to do globally, but the United States certainly has to be a leader. And that's why policy analysis is so important, because even if bad policy gets passed or policy that doesn't necessarily meet the moment, most of the times people don't know what's going on. And if we have people who can actually provide that analysis and break it down and get that out there into the public, it helps us move forward. It helps us to build a case for a better, more sustainable, and a more equitable world. So again, I'm Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, proudly serving the state of Wisconsin. I'm so honored to have received this invitation. And I jumped at the opportunity to do so. A few people have thanked me for showing up. I thank you for having me. Seriously, it is. This is an easy thing to respond to, and I know the weather is really nice outside, so I don't want to talk for a long time because we've earned this weather. I want to say to Cartesia, we got a whole lot in common. Whether it's the neighborhood, I was on 26 and Locust. Wow. I see you at the Delta Stole. I also wear crimson and cream. Oh, wow. All right. Well, there we go. There we go. And you mentioned the secretaries and the custodians. I'll remind people about my own journey because these paths aren't linear, not for the majority of folks, especially those who don't come from wealth or those who don't come from politically connected families. You know, in 2009, I was the receptionist in the mayor's office in Milwaukee. And it was one of the most amazing opportunities that I had because, you know, people had to sit with me for at least 5 minutes by myself. And so I had a chance to, you know, learn from, you know, whether it was the governor who came in, you know, different elected leaders from around the city or foreign visitors even. I had a chance to talk and learn more. And that's ultimately how I got to this position today. If I were not a receptionist, I wouldn't be lieutenant governor. And I'll tell you one part where we do break off. It's the Black Caucus, is the internship or the fellowship. I got denied for that fellowship. So that's where the similarities end. You are well on your way, well ahead of where I was at that time. And we had a conversation with me and some people on my team, and this issue actually came up about, you know, an internship, and I was like, I actually got denied for a congressional internship. Which one? I said, well, it's the Black Caucus internship. And it was, and they said that's my origin story. So had I not been denied that internship, would not be in front of you today. But no, seriously, I want to congratulate you on everything, all the wonderful successes, as well as the rest of this graduating class. It's great to be here in person. You know, I just cannot overstate how much joy it brings me to be able to celebrate this moment with you and be able to look you all face to face, not on Zoom. I absolutely hate Zoom at this point in my life, and if I never have to do another Zoom meeting, so be it. But we know we're not past that point yet. But regardless of how many times I say it's good to see you in person, that's a statement that never gets old. So to all the graduates, an immense congratulations to each and every one of you on your amazing achievements and accomplishments. You know, graduating with a master's degree is no small feat, and so I, along with everybody else who's here today, applaud you all. And to the family, to the friends, any other supporters of distinguished guests, of the distinguished graduates, I want to offer my most sincere appreciation on behalf of the graduating class, because we all know how much your support has meant to them, because nobody gets to accomplish these achievements on their own. It takes a support system to make it possible. So for that, I'm incredibly grateful to you all. And I do understand that we have a member of our administration amongst the graduates today, in Evan Steck. So on behalf of the administration, on behalf of our team, congratulations to you for all the hard work you do as senior appointments coordinator. Since you are not in my office, feel free to ask for a raise. I'll sign off on it if you need me to. But I stand before you all today, not just because I've been on a ballot before, not because I hold office in this building. I stand before you today because I'm someone who's sat in a seat just like yours, and I've wondered what would come next. I was born and raised in the city of Milwaukee. My mother was a public school teacher. My dad worked on an assembly line for 30 years. I was also a proud product of Milwaukee Public Schools. And after attending an HBCU, I started off working for different political campaigns, and then the Milwaukee mayor's office, before deciding to hit the ground and pounding the pavement for Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allied for Hope, or MICA for short, which is a faith-based social justice organization. Our issues are jobs and economic development, education, immigration reform, and treatment instead of prison. And we analyzed a lot of policy. We saw a whole lot that was not working for people in our community. And after not getting the responses that we felt we deserved from our elected leaders, we took our case to the public to make sure that people understood what was actually happening in an attempt to shift public opinion, not in our favor as an organization, but in favor of advancing community interests. And I tell you, I love working in organizing and politics. I got to meet so many amazing people along the way. And at the age of 25, depending on who you ask, it's either very young or very old, I ran for state representative. And that led me to sitting in one of these seats right over here. And it was the honor of my life to be able to sit in that chair, to represent a community that had given me so much, but still a community that had been drastically underserved, bringing a voice to a fight that often seemed hopeless. And that's why I said they are just memories, not all good memories. But I learned a lot during my time in the assembly. Learned as much from the successes in this building as I did from the failures, and quite possibly may have learned more from those failures, because at least we know what not to do. But I'll say that all of that laid the groundwork for the role that I'm honored to serve in today. And when I took my oath of office, when I became lieutenant governor, I carried the weight of being the first. And even though I'm the first person who looks like me in this office in the history of this state, I've dedicated my work to ensuring that so many others could become first in any sort of regard, whether it's the first woman, the first person who identifies and not a straight person who is always populating rooms like this. This is a very, it's a singularly dominated place. And we don't have all voices at the table that are adequately represented. And I'll tell you, for a lack of representation, we find ourselves farther and farther from solutions. I remember as an organizer, we had a poverty summit. And in this poverty summit, we broke out into little groups. And I knew everybody in the group, and I'm like, something's off here. And I asked the question, I was like, which one of y'all been in poverty in the last 10 years? It was nobody. Nobody experienced poverty, at least in the last 10 years. I knew them well enough to know they probably never experienced poverty. And I knew at that moment that this was a room where we weren't gonna answer the question. We weren't gonna solve the problem until we bring people from impacted groups, whether it's people of different sexual orientations, different immigration statuses, different life and lived experiences. We will be so far from solutions in rooms like this, in rooms like the State Senate, or even the governor's office. And that's why we have to fight to build a more inclusive society that does not keep people away. We need to eliminate those hurdles and barriers that have historically stood in the way of progress for us all, because rising tide lifts all boats. Like Paul Wellstone says, we all do better when we all do better. Now, again, that is a responsibility of a first, to make sure that, one, I'm not the last, but to also make sure that people have that opportunity regardless of what you think may hold you back. Because I can tell you right now, the things that have kept people back are actually strengths. And there is a reason why they don't want those experiences in rooms like this, because power can be tilted to the powerless, which is exactly what we need. And that's exactly why we need all of you in this room today, so we can throw open the gates of opportunity to ensure that the few become the many. In my lifetime, we elected the first black president, first black woman as vice president, and we also confirmed the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States. Like, these are all exciting things, but I'll tell you, for anybody who set out on those journeys, anybody who set out on a path that's similar to that, they knew that playing it safe is a risky decision. And I'll tell you, decades ago, those achievements would have seemed like pipe dreams. They would have seemed impossible, but it is the reality for today. And it's the reality for so many people who are growing up in this country right now, to see people who look like them. And it's also important to see people who don't look like you, so you understand that we all have value in this country. Everybody in this room, everybody we encounter has value. And too often, there has been this idea that only some people matter, given a social status, given the zeros in a bank account. But we are here today as a generation of people to say that time is over with. This is a new day in this country where people will be able to have access to opportunities that their ancestors would have never dreamed of, that no matter where you come from, whether it's a farm in Osseo or the Door County Peninsula, or one of the most underprivileged zip codes in the entire state, you can accomplish amazing things. And I know that all of you are well on your way to doing those amazing things too, no matter where you've come from or how far you have left to go. And there is something to be said about taking those calculated risks. And when I speak to those in the generations before mine, I'd like to thank them for everything they did to bring us to this point. When I speak to elementary schoolers, I hope to inspire them to start on the journey that leads to exactly where you all are now in these seats. The La Follette School of Public Affairs has given you incredible tools to get started on these next steps in your journey. This school is ranked 6th for public administration education and 4th for social policy. You have truly received a world-class education from this institution, something to be proud of. And it's not easy to go to grad school. It's really not easy to do it in the middle of a pandemic that forces you to take classes on Zoom from your parents' living room sometimes, or wherever you may have to go. And I know I'm probably the millionth person to say this to you, but you deserve to hear it again. I seriously commend you on overcoming the challenges that you faced over the course of the pandemic, the unfair circumstances that have been thrown in your way. The fact that you all have toughed it out, stuck to it, and completed this journey is truly inspiring for me, but also for so many others who get to witness this moment. It's also a great example of our state's motto, which is forward. And that's something that should always be our response to the challenges that we all encounter together. And that's the one thing I have, the one issue I take with the sentiment of us wanting to return to normal. We got to aspire to move forward. Because as we all know, normal wasn't working for way too many people. Even before we started wearing masks and staying inside, and any minute on any news channel or a scroll on Twitter if you truly hate yourself, it will remind you that we have a long way to go. And voting rights, we see, are being restricted anywhere and everywhere. Climate change isn't just knocking at the door anymore, it's right here. Decades, sometimes centuries of precedent and progress seems to hang on by a thread. And in putting this speech together, I thought about words Dr. Martin Luther King, as I often do, and that is the time is always right to do what is right. It's a poignant reminder that no matter what's happening around the world, the time is now. The time to act is now. The time to fight against the odds is now. The time to make changes in the world around us is now. We have undoubtedly made progress towards achieving Dr. King's dream of a better America. And the graduation of so many of you today, the fact that I'm here in this position and so much more are evidence of that. However, history asks of us, it actually demands of us, it begs of us to stand in this moment in time and fight for bold change. Now, over the past couple years, I've been proud to see people do just that. People taken to the streets to march and rally in solidarity towards a more just and a more equitable society. Whether it's justice for Black lives or inequities we see today in our healthcare systems, our schools, and access to clean air and clean water. Or as we've all seen in recent weeks, for the reproductive rights and bodily autonomy of people all across this state and all across this country. And so I hope that we'll continue to find the resolve to fight in Dr. King's name for the kind of world we want to pass on to future generations. I hope we continue this legacy by making our voices heard and fighting for a more fair and equitable state and nation, because the time is always right to do what is right. Not only right by ourselves, but by those who came before us and those that come after us. The fact of the matter is, we don't simply stand on the shoulders of generations before ours. We have to continue to build upon the legacy that they struggled to establish. We have to choose to use that foundation to push for greater progress to make it that much easier for the next generation. And as we continue to push forward, there are going to be even more obstacles in our way. New levels, new devils. But there will also be times that we come up short or get distracted, or life throws us a curveball. We might be tempted to give up, to call it a day, throw in the towel, but we cannot. And that's exactly what so many dark and insidious forces in our democracy are counting on. They want us to to give up, to lose faith. That's when they skirt the rules. That's when we see our friends get scammed and our loved ones. And we also see the chipping away of protections and progress that we fought so hard to build together. And that's when they divide us up by where we live or advance the lie that for some people to achieve progress, it has to come at the expense of others, which couldn't be more false. We can't afford to give up or subscribe to apathy over activism. There will be more challenges. There will be times where the odds seem long, where the challenge is too steep. But as then State Senator Barack Obama said, do we practice in a politics of cynicism? Do we participate in a politics of cynicism or a politics of hope? I subscribe to the latter, and I hope you all do the same. And I do want to leave you all with a little bit of advice. I feel like it wouldn't really be a commencement speech without some. So first, please, please, please enjoy this moment. You've worked so hard to get here. Have some cake, drink a beer if you so choose. Enjoy the time with your family, friends, and loved ones. Take a moment to be proud of yourselves because you've earned it. And as you push ahead in your careers, as you build the books that you'll write one day, think about the rooms that you'll be walking into. Take a look around the table and know that you do belong. Pull up a chair, be ready to make your mark, but also notice who's not being represented at that table. Advocate for them. Hold the door open and invite them into the conversation. Ensure that the first becomes the many, that history will look kindly on how we made representation a reality rather than a dream. And the 47 of you graduating today will go on to do many different things. Some of you will work in local, state, or the federal government. Some will work at nonprofit organizations. Some will go off to the private sector. Few of you might even be continuing your higher education journeys. Maybe some of you will find yourselves with a desk in this chamber. Lord knows we need you. And no matter what you decide, all of you will do magnificent things. All of you are passionate young leaders. All of you will forever take with you the Wisconsin idea, the values that were instilled upon you during your education at UW. And know that I'll always be in your corner, rooting for each and every one of you as you navigate your next steps in life. And I mean that tenfold, because I hope you do choose to be a change maker in this state. I know one of my favorite parts of this job is going out across Wisconsin, seeing the beauty, doing the things I'd never have a chance to do otherwise. Got to tap a maple tree, got to transfer sturgeon from one river to another. All things would have never guessed I'd be doing in my life, but here we are. But throughout all of that, meeting people across this state from so many different walks of life, and that travel also reminds me what my why is. And that's fighting for people, wherever they are, regardless of their zip code. It's advocating for sustainability and for equity, the values I've dedicated my work in this office to. And so as you chart the next steps in your journey, my last piece of advice is to take a moment, explore a corner of this state. Go out, enjoy the capacity for connection that emerging from this pandemic has afforded us. Take a drive up to the Apostle Islands, see the bluffs in La Crosse, take a day and tour my hometown in Milwaukee. And in doing so, I hope you find what I've found, time and time again. This is a state which I love deeply, a place that I'm proud to call home, and people all over worth fighting for, because we know that time does not wait, and neither shall we, because forever in this state, we say forward. So stay far from timid, make moves only when your heart's in it, and live the phrase, sky's the limit. I could not think of a better way to transition to saying loudly and proudly, on Wisconsin, and best of luck to the Follette School of Public Affairs class of 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. At graduation, we have the honor of announcing, for the first time, 3 La Follette School Student Awards. The Director's Achievement Award recognizes a student for her or his outstanding academic record. The major criterion for the award is grade point average, but the graduating student also must demonstrate evidence of being an outstanding public policy thinker and communicator. This year's winner was selected for being a major contributor to the La Follette School's intellectual and student life as well. I'm delighted to share that this year's Director's Award winner is Matthew Voss. Matthew, can you please come up and receive your award? You're so great. Thank you. Congratulations, Matthew. Wow, what an achievement. Next, I have the honor of presenting 2 Best Paper Awards. In these awards, La Follette School faculty have nominated papers that exemplify the school's writing and analytic skills. First is this year's Penniman Prize. Clara Penniman was the founder and director of the La Follette School's predecessor, the Center for the Study of Public Policy and Administration. The La Follette School presents the Penniman Prize to a graduating student who has written the most outstanding paper while being at the La Follette School. This year's paper was nominated by Professor Dave Weimer. The paper was entitled Produce Safety in the Second Decade of the FSMA, Charting the FDA's Path Forward, and was written by Liz Duffy. Liz can't be with us today. She's traveling overseas. But those of you who have a phone and quick access to your social, please do pass on the great news to Liz. I'll have a chance to share it with her later today. Finally, the Peoria Prize recognizes the best paper in science and public policy and was set up through a philanthropic gift by Emmanuel Peoria and his wife, Nora Kahn Peoria. This year's paper was nominated by Professor Tim Smeeding. It's entitled Electric Vehicle Production, Industry Case Studies, and Federal-Level Supply-Side Policies to Accelerate Market Transition. That's a mouthful, Indu. It was written by Indu Kilararu. Indu, please come forward and receive your award. And now to the awarding of the degrees. My colleague, Mo O'Connor, our school's graduate program manager, will announce each student's name, while Steve Kulig, our school's associate director, will hand out the certificates. Mo?
James Edmund Anderson. Haley Barwick. Lou Blank. Christopher Brooks. Genevieve Caffrey. John Marston Connors. May DeChavez. Man Ding. Mohammed M. Fofarna. Molly Gallagher. Emily Lorraine Gams. Kelsey Maria Gordon. Jenna Hatcher Green. Matthew Gerard Hansen. Emma Claire Hines. Dylan Ray Helmenstein. Jacob Hallnagel. Alexandra Faye Kalick. Manpreet Kaur Sandhu. William Keenan. Ethan Kenny. Indu Kalaro. Alexandra Martine Noor. Carte'cia J Lawrence. Stephanie Lichty. Philomena Lindquist. Hannah Claire Livingston. Matthew Marcus. Jesse Zachariah Martin. Max Ross McMeekin. Dana Marie Nielsen. Ian Pearson. Katie Jo Pollock. Tessa Cheris Riley. Evan David Steck. Anna Nayo Sushi. Paul Kerr Tadros. Nova Marie Tebby. Sean Vilbert. Matthew Joseph Voss. And Charlie Warzeka.
Graduates, please stand. Now I will ask you to move your tassels from the right to the left. And audience, please join me in congratulating these 22 La Follette graduates. I'm going to ask you to remain standing for just a minute. Commencement is a time of new beginnings, and we're delighted to be sending you forth with new skills and new insight to do good in our world. But please, don't forget about us. Don't forget about the La Follette School. We need you to help us as we work to educate the next generation of outstanding public and nonprofit leaders. Audience members, thank you. Thank you for attending today. Thank you for your support of these amazing students. So let's close this graduation ceremony the way we should, with our graduates tossing their caps.